Welcome to Buckets for our NBA MLK Day extravaganza. My name is Matt Moore, coming to you from the Tommy John home studios. Hope you guys had a great weekend betting the NFL, betting the NBA, betting Unrivaled. If you're a sicko like Joe Dellera, having a lot of fun. We are coming to you from the Tommy John home studios. We're going to do best bets for Monday in the association for January 20th. Huge day. We have games starting at noon Eastern, rolling all the way through the night. It's a big day in the NBA. Lots to celebrate, lots of good stuff that you should definitely check out. Don't just skip over it. I think it's very easy to just be like, yeah, whatever. Because you live every year, and MLK Day comes every year, but like really listen to the stuff. Like there's really important. And the NBA I think does a much better job than it gets credit for highlighting this stuff. Like watch the Grizzlies broadcast if you got League Pass. Watch the Hawks broadcast if you got League Pass. Like don't watch the Jazz broadcast if you have League Pass. Like these are the choices that we need to make to honor Martin Luther King. I'm just kidding. I love all the folks in Utah. Great broadcast crew there. So we're going to do best bets. Joining me, I've got Bryan Fonseca NY on Twitter and on YouTube, where I came on his show and we talked trade deadline and a bunch of stuff. So go check out his YouTube page. I've got Joe Dellera, who is an absolute sicko and only gives me the most obscure props in the world constantly over and over and over again. You can find him on Twitter and on the Action Network app at Joe Dellera. He's hosted the Cash That podcast, which you should check out. And I've got the middler on the roof, Michael Fiddle. Fiddle's Picks, Twitter, Action Network app, the Advantage Sports Betting podcast, as well as Fiddle's got his own Substack. So you need to check out both of those things. If you guys like the show, support the guys that do the show with me. Don't I also need your support, but I really want you to support these guys because these guys are phenomenal and they're the reason that the show is a success. I am just the snarky jackass making snide comments. That's all I am. These guys are really the driving force and they're all really smart and they take such a nuanced and thoughtful approach to giving you the best bets on a nightly basis. Unless it's a spread, in which case Joe Dellera just apparently throws a dart at a board and then goes back into Mark Williams props for the 700th time. So we're going to do best bets. That's going to be our focus today. Got a lot of them lined up here for you. We're going to go around the horn. Let's start with Bryan Fonseca. Bryan, what are your best bets for Monday in the association?
I have two. We're going with Jalen Johnson double against the New York Knicks and under 224.5. That one's still out there for the Dallas Mavericks and the Charlotte Hornets.
Okay. Fiddler the Middler. What is your best bet or bets for Monday?
Give me the New York Knicks -6. There's also 6.5s that are -105, and I think that would be fine to play as well.
What's the threshold?
6.5 -110, and I don't think it's gonna. Before this episode comes out, we won't have the Karl Anthony Towns news, which a lot of this hinges on. So it'll depend on that pre-game half hour before the game when he's ruled in or out. That will really shift the line.
If he's ruled in, what's your threshold?
8.
I don't have to if you're just like, I don't want it unless you get the best of the number. That's a perfectly
I could explain both when we go through it.
Okay, that sounds good. Joe Dellera, what are your best bets?
I like Mark Williams over...
What?
Yay, he's unleashed. He's unleashed.
God.
Over 15.5 points. If it moves to 16.5, make sure you look because if it moves to 16.5, see if it's 17.5 points plus assists. That's a good pivot there. And I also like Desmond Bane over 18.5 points.
Okay, good stuff. I need to make sure. Nope, they're still not going to allow me to have this, which is just phenomenal. All right, I like Zion Williamson 25 plus at plus 100. I also like Zion Williamson 30 plus at plus 230 versus the Utah Jazz. I like the Hawks and Knicks over. I like the Cavaliers is now 8. I got 7.5. I like it still at 8. I have a stop point there at 9.5. So I don't like the Cavaliers anything over 9.5. Those are my plays on the evening, and unless I'm mistaken, I had to look up an injury thing real quick to make sure because I double checked this earlier, but I needed to make sure. Okay, yeah, that's all it's going to be for me in those games. Let's start. Where should we start? Let's start with the first game. Let's just go through the first game here, and let's take a look at the Dallas Mavericks at the Charlotte Hornets. Fonseca, give me your cap on the under here.
The Hornets have the most unders in the NBA as a home favorite. They have 13 out of 18 games. This opened at 232, which I looked at, but if you just sort of go through the numbers, like none of these totals, or damn near none of them, or any of them, however that's said in proper English, are basically where they were at open.
Okay. It's plus 5.5. Does that change your cap at all?
Oh, I don't care about the spread.
Okay, cool. Go ahead.
Yeah. So for me, it's like Charlotte's playing at a much lower pace than I think people would kind of consider, given that LaMelo Ball is LaMelo Ball and putting up the numbers that he's putting up. But they're like 21st in pace as of right now, and Dallas isn't a team that's going to play like lights out. I think this has the potential to be a game that's very low scoring, very defensive, or a little bit more defensive than we would think. Charlotte has actually played to the over in 3 straight games, but they were to the under 8 or 9 times consecutively before that. And this is just a spot that I don't think is going to come with a ton of points. And I think it could be maybe, I wouldn't say surprisingly close, because, I mean, the spread's only 5.5, but Charlotte, for whatever reason, at home, they've had a bunch of grinded out games this season, or just a bunch of games where they just fail to put up points. So while I like that, you know, Joe is hitting Mark Williams on points, I'm going to tell him on that. But at the same time, I don't see this being like a super high scoring game, even though probably in another year I would have said that. But Charlotte just doesn't play as fast as I feel like they honestly should.
Mavs are 62% to the over when they're the road team. The Hornets are doing the math in my head. 68.4% to the under when they're at home. Fiddle, can I ask your opinion as a market as a number reader?
Yep.
So this opened 222.5. It's up to 224, and I have a really hard time with this. I just kind of be like, hey, when I get to it, if I like the number, I will bet it, right? But like, in chasing the sweet CLV, and every point matters when you're in these totals, as I find out week after week after week, where I've missed, I think, 6 in the last week by a single free throw appearance at the end. If you're not somebody that wants to just sit in front of the monitor all day watching the line, which is obviously the best way to do it, is just get yourself hooked up with the Action Network app, and you can actually like watch the lines move, tick, 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 or one of the other services. How do you kind of approach this in terms of wanting to get the best number if it's moving against where you're going, right? So I like the under here. I'm with Bryan on this. I like the under, but we've already seen in the markets like we like the over. Now that makes me nervous, but also okay, I will like have more confidence in it at a higher number. How do you approach tracking that throughout the day? Because like Dellera bets props, and he's got to bet them immediately, because the second that he like glances sideways at them, they get nuked into oblivion. But the totals are like a different kind of subject. So how do you kind of approach like timing wise trying to handle the market move?
So what you'll try and look to do is find the resistance point, is what you call it, when it's gone too far and starts to come back the other way. So if you are willing to track the market and you do have something that's going the opposite direction, I'm the type that is in front of the screen, and if not in front of the screen, I'm opening my phone and checking the screen 6-7 times a day, right? Like even more than that, obsessively. So I will wait and continue to wait and then get as close to tip off unless it starts to come back the other way. So I've pulled up the odds board for this specific one, and the timeline of the odds changes. And right now at 10:30 p.m., it was 224.5 and moved back to 224 at one book. So I would say you're starting to beat resistance points when all of the board is now back to 224. 224.5 is a minus 115. You're looking at some of the sharper books that you respect, and they're at 224, 223.5. And you're like, okay, now's the time to strike back. I think actually Bryan's completely right. And I think it'll probably meet somewhere in the middle of this open at 221.5 and where Bryan got it at 224.5. It's also a day game under, which, like, if you're looking at trends, if you're looking at what late bettors are going to come into, I'm definitely going to talk about day games in the Knicks cap. And so I just think, or just early start times, those are baked in under spots. So Bryan getting like the first sign of a resistance point and jumping in, especially when it lines up with the spot, I think makes a lot of sense.
Okay, Joe Dellera, give me the spot on the guy. The most bet every single day I get these emails. Most bet prop in the NBA is Mark Williams. Give me the prop on Mark Williams.
I will take some credit for that. But look, they traded Nick Richards, and they finally just unleashed Mark Williams, and he's been awesome. We're seeing his minutes have a significant uptick. And his last 3 games, he's played almost 30 minutes or over 30 minutes over the last 3. Admittedly, slightly softer matchups against Phoenix, Utah, and Chicago, but still 24, 31, 19 points. When he's played 25 or more minutes this season, he's hit this in 6 of 7 games, averaging about 20 points a game. I just think the line is a little bit low, and it's just not fully adjusted for the fact that he actually has a minute ceiling. Before, it was very dependent, even if he was having a decent game, if Nick Richards happened to be having maybe a slightly better game or fit whatever was going on schematically a little bit better, you could see his minutes getting capped around like 22 to 24 minutes. Now we're basically seeing 25 minutes as the floor, and then we're actually going upwards of 30. So I think that he has a lot more opportunity here. He's a lot more potential. Obviously, you have that dynamic pick and roll game with LaMelo Ball. So I just think that there's a lot of opportunity for Mark Williams to continue going. And at 15.5, I think the prop line is a little bit too low. Again, like I said before, if the prop moves from 15.5 to 16.5 points, look at his points plus assists, because for the assist spot anyway, if that's only at say 17.5, so the points line 16.5, PA is 17.5, at that point I would rather have the points plus assists, because he's had basically at least 1 assist in every game, and we're seeing some upside. Over the last 3 games, he's had 6, 3, and 6 potential assists to go along with 4, 2, and 3 actual assists. So there's a little bit of upside on the assist department, but given the fact that right now I'm seeing a 2 stat difference between the 2 stats, I'd rather just go with the points.
All right, let's do a parlay. Let's do the same game on this because I think it's interesting. We do have the under. I always like doing a stat or a points over with a under, because it's just like, look, somebody scores in games that go under. I think that's pretty regular. 15 plus for Mark Williams, under 224. And then I make this game even with the absences of Luka Doncic in this game and
Brandon Miller.
Gafford, I think.
No, Lively's questionable.
Lively's questionable.
And Brandon Miller's supposed to be out indefinitely.
Yeah.
So we won't see him.
Okay. I still make this 6.3. I've only got like 0.8 on it, but I still like that enough with where Charlotte has been at to go ahead and take the Mavericks. I think is a little bit undervalued here. Like the Mavericks are only laying less than 2 possessions against a team that is, shall we say, not invested in having more points than the opponent at the end of the game. And so I don't want Mavericks minus 5.5 as a best bet, but I do want Mavericks minus 5.5, under 224, and 15 plus Mark Williams points. That's plus 550 at DraftKings. Send in the same game parlay. I do think I want to dive into this, and Fiddle, I might like recruit you for a project I think that there's going to be value once I can figure out, because like I'm having a hard time getting the model to spit out the right unders on me this year. I was killer last year. I'm having a hard time this year. But if I can get to a point where I feel confident in unders, I think there's a lot of value in taking certain points prop overs with unders, because a lot of unders are built on the entire defense does well, not the individual defense on a certain person. So I think there's probably some value, but we got to figure out kind of how that inverse correlation. What are the thresholds? What are the mechanics of it? Because that's one of the things that we just don't know. Is the books are never going to let you know that about what's the impact of the correlation versus the inverse correlation. Am I right?
Yeah, I can tell you right off the bat, like a standard 2-leg parlay should have a plus 264 if things were not correlated at all. If you were taking a football game and an NBA game, you'd get plus 264 if you're on minus 110. It's just standard odds, no reflection. So if you're picking off things, you could kind of use that as a base to bake in how much correlation tax you're paying, or if you're getting an inverse correlation boost. Definitely something I need to do myself is understand those values. We were saying it before the show. It's binomial distribution is how you calculate those markets. It's very nerdy, but it needs to be done because there are possibly edges, and there's not edges that I've found, but those are the ways to find them for sure.
And on the basketball side, like I did a little bit of research, and basically like there's a very solid history of players going for 30 plus points in games that go under versus a certain elite defenses. And so, and a lot of it, I've talked about this, makes sense. If you don't have easy passes to make and you have to, and it's just like the guy's got to just try and score. He's got no opportunities. No, there are no back cuts. There is no lob to the rim. There is no, like, they're not doubling you because they have good enough defenders. Those guys are going to try and break the defense by scoring individually. And it's like, it's no risk of a turnover. So I think there's some value there. Joe, do you have any thoughts on that real quick?
I think that it depends sometimes on obviously who's playing, because if you think that, like, for example, one team, it suits their style of ball to go towards like an under in the first place, then I think that maybe that can kind of influence it as well, where you're saying, well, this is the style of game that they want to be playing. This should matter here. So I think that there is something to that. I don't totally know all the math on the back end, especially off the top of my head. But I do think that obviously you can try to create edges and try to find edges. And with now, obviously, with the availability of even more player props, I do think that that is kind of where a lot of the edge can be found, because it is a little bit more of a derivative market. It's still a newer market, even though we are seeing a lot more options. So definitely something to consider.
Can I give an example of one?
Yes.
Shooting guard overs with against the Portland Trailblazers with the game unders.
Yeah.
Is something that we see frequently, and that just kind of makes sense, right? Because they have a lot of rim protectors that they could swap in and out. They can get beat on the perimeter, and then if you're overly reliant on the perimeter for your attack, it's probably less efficient, and you might get less total scoring. So I just looked at the box score from tonight. Zach LaVine had 27 of the Bulls' 102 total points. So it happened the other night with Jalen Green against them as well.
Okay. Let's go on to Knicks and Hawks. By the way, the Hawks are basically an elite team, one of the best teams in the league if they are facing the 4 best teams in the Eastern Conference, and are pretty much a mid piece of garbage against everybody else. And it is driving me categorically insane. As Jim Turvey laughs all the way to the bank like the Joker. Fiddle, give me the cap on Knicks -6.
So a lot of this has to come down to schedule, Matt. The Knicks are in the 8th of 14 games where they're either at home, or the 2 lone road games there are Philadelphia, which is one of the easiest trips from New York, and Brooklyn, which is a subway ride. So I know that's going to be team bus for both. However, so it's 14 games that they're like in prime position in a homestand right now. And then you get this schedule blip where it's going to be like an early start time in MSG with revenge angle after the Hawks not only took them out on their home court in the playoffs a few years ago and started the fuck Trae Young chant, is probably the biggest the biggest chant throughout New York. You go to a Yankee game and you get on the 456 subway up to the Bronx and they'll be screaming fuck Trae Young as you go to a Yankee game for no reason. And so then you get the NBA Cup where he rolls the dice of, the last time he was at MSG. And then we also get the Karl Anthony Towns upgraded to a full practice. When this line, because sometimes we have these like look ahead lines in the NBA when we have some of these marquee days, and MLK is obviously a marquee NBA day. So this was priced at 9 earlier, like a week ago, from a lot of sharp books. And so that's why I say I would take the 6.5 with Cat like seemingly being upgraded more from questionable to probable after going through a full practice. So if he's in, I think he's worth a full 2 points. And then I would take it up to 8 because, again, I think Cat's worth a full 2 points, maybe even a little more to this Knicks team, which would bring you up to 8.5, back to that original 9 that we knew about. I always talk about key numbers. Key numbers are very important to me. We saw it, in football with the 6 and the 7 in the Eagles game or a lot of these spots. The 6 is the most important number in the NBA, and then 8 and 9 are 2-3. So this range is super important. So if you can catch really any closing line value in this area, you're off to a plus EV ticket right from the tip.
Okay. I think on the basketball side, I like this because Capella is going to play back off of. They will not try and switch this with Cat. So if Cat's back, which I'm betting it based off of the assumption Cat's going to be back. Dellera, he practiced today. Yes.
Yeah, practiced in full.
Okay. Joe, as our resident Knicks obsessive, give me how do you feel on the basketball side about this matchup?
Did Big Bodega text you and let you know how he was feeling?
Hey, I mean, we saw that he obviously had the full practice, so so I think that obviously matters. I do think from a basketball perspective, obviously we have some of the narrative stuff like Fiddle talked about, but I do think that this is a good matchup for Cat, especially based on what Atlanta kind of does defensively. So my hesitation is honestly like, I don't know. I know that he practiced in full. I know that he is dealing with the sprained thumb, the bone chips in his thumb. I don't know if that really affects him scoring the basketball, if that changes his aggression, what exactly that does to him. That's really my hesitation in wanting to take a prop for him. But otherwise, I like it. I would lean that way. But I struggle with it a little bit. I think that Fiddle's market read is right. And obviously, if he says he's going to bet the Knicks, I'm not going to talk him off betting the Knicks. So I like the spot for New York. I do think it's a good bounce back spot. And the schedule spot in particular, I think, is strong. Just having to not have to travel, everybody can kind of get rested, get recovered, especially with the way Tibbs obviously runs guys a lot of minutes.
How do you feel about this matchup between the Knicks and the Hawks?
I mean, it should be a revenge spot, but I mean, Trae Young kind of has their number to some extent. I thought this would be like, hey, I looked at Jalen Brunson's over, for example, but I kind of wanted better results against the Hawks recently, and this is because this is one of the teams that could put length on Jalen Brunson and slow him down, with Dyson Daniels, most notably. And that's where I look at this game and I'm like, all right, not that they need Karl Anthony Towns, but it makes the offense a lot smoother, opens them up a little bit. I'm on a prop this game that's going against the Knicks. I do think they're going to win the game. But if Karl Anthony Towns is out, and this is fairly obvious to anyone who watches basketball, but it does make the Knicks like a little bit easier to guard because Karl Anthony Towns and Jericho Sims are two very different players. And with Jericho Sims, like, he's a roller who doesn't always roll well. He's an anchor who doesn't always protect the paint well. He's a rebounder who can get beat on the glass. And it kind of makes a Knicks team that allows the second fewest rebounds per 100 possessions in the NBA a little bit more or a lot more fragile against an Atlanta Hawks team that I think plays harder than people realize, especially, they tend to, what you outline in terms of what they do against these elite teams versus what they do against some of these mid-tier teams, it's kind of like, yeah, they rise up against elite competition. They have that on their resume so far. And I would say that the Knicks, maybe they're not the Celtics or the Cavs, but the Knicks are still third in the Eastern Conference right now. And Trae Young, clearly, like, I think he wants to get booed more than anybody else. Like, he's the equivalent of the biggest heel in the WWE when he goes to Madison Square Garden, and he's actually been in the WWE ring before antagonizing wrestlers. Like, this dude is a dick, and I mean that as a compliment. So I think with Atlanta, like, there are a number of different ways to bet this that are just interesting props. But I think Karl Anthony Towns is like the big swing piece here because I would probably like be interested in what that line becomes if he's indeed out, but it looks like he's going to play.
I have an interesting trend. I have a couple of interesting trends. So since 2013-14, so the last 10 years, after game 40, so we've got a half season. We are past the halfway mark. We're past all the weirdness of like how the market doesn't know what to do with teams. Like the market started to kind of settle in. The team has a negative point differential, but they're over 500 and they're a dog. So this team's actually not good, but they've won a lot of games and they're a dog after the market has kind of settled in on them. It's not a huge sample. Brandon Anderson would say that I need a bigger one. I like this because it's across so many years. 18-38 straight up, 32%. Okay, nothing really to just write home about there. 31-24-1, 56% against the spread. I find that number interesting. Just that teams in this spot that are actually not good, but win games, actually wind up covering more often than not. So, we'll see. The other one, you talked about the revenge spot. Here's the actual number, because if you're talking about the Knicks, like I don't care about Jalen Brunson, I don't care about OG, and I definitely don't care about Cat. I care about Tibbs. That's what I care about. Since 2022-23, so after that kind of rise year, and they've kind of remade the team into something a little bit more serious since that run where Trae killed them. Since after that run, when Tibbs is the coach and he's a favorite after he lost the last one, 18-6 straight up, 75%. 15-9, 63% against the spread. Tibbs takes care of business. Tibbs, by the way, as a general note, is one of the best coaches as a road favorite. That is not here in this point. I'm just sharing that as like a general. Tibbs is really good as a road favorite because he beats teams he's supposed to. And so I do kind of lean towards Knicks here. I like the over because from a dynamic standpoint, one, Jalen Johnson returns in this game, and there's actually I think not return, but he's back for this game, and they're at like 58% to the over this season when he plays against top or teams that are above 60% winning percentage. So when Jalen plays versus the good teams, those games go over. I project this 237, so I've got some leeway here. So I like the over in this game, and to the point, I actually like over 236. It just went tick down because of course it did. Over 236, Knicks minus 6.5, and that Jalen Johnson double from Bryan. That's plus 700. I like that same game parlay as well. No one.
Jalen Johnson doubles in 9 of his last 12 games, and in both of his games against the Knicks, and he's back from right shoulder inflammation. So he missed a few games. He's back, and he came back and immediately 14-13 against the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, his arm is really good.
Yeah, in both games against the Knicks this year, he's got 23-15 in one, 21-15 in the others, at 15 rebounds in each of those games. And Karl-Anthony Towns has been there for both of them. So this wasn't like a injury related thing. He just, for whatever reason, I mean, not for whatever reason, it's because the Knicks are not as big as you think. Like they have the nickname Wingstop, but their wings have not stopped a lot of actual players in the NBA so far this year. It's been part of the problem defensively. And guys like Jalen Johnson, for example, have been able to have these big rebound performances against them. And Jalen Johnson's one of these dudes. Like I took him double straight up. Right now it's plus 110 out there on the market. We'll see where it lands, but like I think he's gonna get this, and I think there's a chance he gets this in 3 quarters.
We also have Josh Hart questionable, right? So like if Hart were to miss too, you would think that some of those perimeter rebounds open up for another crasher.
Yeah.
I want to ask a question here. So the Knicks are one of those teams that qualifies for. They've actually got pretty good defense, and the Hawks tend to have 30-point scores go over. Like Trey tends to go over when he faces a defense that's good by points per game. The Knicks defense is not actually good, pretty mediocre per 100 possessions. Mm-hmm. But in these lower scoring opponent points per game games, he does pretty well. Is there anybody else that we think is a threat to go over 30 versus the Knicks? Is there anybody else?
I don't know about 30, but like DeAndre Hunter has smoked the Knicks. I don't know, like he's had 20 plus in 6 of his last 7 against the Knicks.
That's notable.
I think it's the way what his shot profile is, the minutes, and like last game he played because he only played 1 game this year against the Knicks on the December game, and he made 4 threes. So he's somebody, if you're looking for a piece, I would rather go with like 20 for him than like trying to find somebody to go with 30.
Okay.
But right, Matt, that goes to your point about the Knicks overhelping on defense that you made on buckets recently, where I mean, we were talking about this where Karl-Anthony Towns will be out there on an island and OG Anunoby or Mikal Bridges feels like they have to overhelp, and then they kick out to the corner, whoever the shooter is. When they played the Bulls, it was often Kobe White, at times Zach LaVine. In this game, DeAndre Hunter is going to get some of those looks. Because if Karl-Anthony Towns is in the game, or even if it's Jericho Sims, like one of the wings will come over and overhelp, and then you have all of a sudden, whether it's Capella, Okongwu, Jalen Johnson, someone's going to kick it out to the wing, and there's DeAndre Hunter, and that's how he goes like 4 for 6 from 3.
Exactly.
Okay, let's do real quick just thoughts on Grizzlies Wolves. Nobody's really got to play on it except for Joe, like Desmond Bane. On his point prop. Joe, can you give me the cap on that? And the other two, if you guys can be prepared to just kind of get your thoughts together on what that game looks like. Joe?
Yeah. I mean, a large part of it is the fact that like this season, just the other day, really like a week ago, he had 21 points against Minnesota. He's hit this in 8 of his last 10 games. He's averaging 22 points a game. He kind of had a slow start to the season in terms of his scoring. He's only averaging 17.3 points per game this season. But last year, obviously, different rotations because of the amount of injuries that they had. But he was up to almost 24 points a game. I think that they're starting to get into a little bit more of a rhythm. Everybody's starting to find a little bit more of what their role is, what shots they're supposed to be taking, what shots they're going to be taking. So I like the fact that he's playing about like 30-ish, like 33 minutes a game over the last 10. So it is a little, he continues to start adding, they keep adding minutes slowly. It feels like to the Memphis Grizzlies rotation. 18 and a half, I think is good. I like the fact that they're also pretty healthy right now overall. And I think that actually helps Desmond Bane. He doesn't feel the need to facilitate in the same way. So I like him to go over the 18 and a half. He's really had, every time he's gone over this over the last 10, he's actually had 20 plus. So if it bumps, I don't really mind a 1 point jump for Desmond Bane here either.
I lean a little bit towards Memphis on this one, just based off the matchup and how it kind of looks. I'm having a hell of a time. I cannot get it's not like my model's like all spitting out 220s, but every single game with the Grizzlies it's like, oh yeah, this is like 224 because the Grizzlies defense is so good. But every game is like Memphis putting up 140 points because they're just playing so goddamn fast. I can't account for it. Fiddle, kind of, what are your thoughts on this game and what the market looks like for this one?
So I already took Memphis, and I'm totally comfortable still taking them -3.5. I think this is a strong Memphis spot. They're a very strong home team. Obviously, they get a little more up for the MLK game too. And then this Minnesota team is just disorganized. They're coming off of a win against New York, which was out without Karl Anthony Towns. They've been shifting around the starting lineup. This is just a very well-organized team versus not organized team. And Memphis they have a great defense, but they play with so much pace. So it's really hard to cap their totals. I even also bet Zach Edey over 2.5 first quarter points in like an obscure prop. But I really like Memphis in this spot.
Jaw's questionable with a foot, but
yeah.
I feel like he's going to play. Like, this is their time to actually get on national TV. And so I just feel like he's going to play.
If he's in, it's 5.
Bryan?
Yeah. Memphis has covered 5 of their last 6. So I like that going into this. I also like the spot for them a lot. I'm probably more down on this Minnesota team than a lot of other people. But for whatever reason, they just surprise me every now and again. Like, I thought the Julius Randle return to Madison Square Garden, underwhelming as it was, the game went in their favor. You know what I mean? Like, it was ridiculous. With Memphis, sneaky thing here, this is not going to factor into the line or anything like that, but something to monitor for the future. But GG Jackson is off the injury report, and that's like another piece to Memphis's depth. I'm wondering how they're going to incorporate him. I don't think it's because we've talked about like, hey, when somebody's returning from injury, you want to bet against that team sometimes. This doesn't fit that profile because, you know, it's a young piece. He's barely going to be in the rotation to start. It's probably going to get 10, 12 minutes, if that, but has been with the Memphis Hustle in the G League a little bit. And I wonder how they're going to reincorporate him because we've talked about Memphis practically all season, how deep they are going forward and potentially, like, do we want to lay a future on them to win the Western Conference? Can they do something at the trade deadline to sort of bolster their odds? I feel like with this piece, and then you have, like, you know, down the line, I mean, John Moran has to stay healthy, as does Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., but, you know, Vince Williams Jr. will be back at some point, and I do wonder if there's going to be a consolidation thing within the next couple of weeks. But I'm curious to see how GG Jackson returns because he's a fun player, and I like Memphis in general in this game, whether or not Ja plays.
Okay. I like the Cavs -8 versus the Suns. I make this game 12.6 fully healthy. Mobley, by my estimation, is worth about 2 points to the spread, which I think seems right. Like, Mobley's really important, but they do have a very high level of replacement player in terms of like how they're able to play. It's like, oh, Mobley's out. All right, well, we're going to play high pick and roll with either Garland or Mitchell, and then just spread the floor with 3 shooters instead. And Mobley's been good from the arc, but he's not necessarily like a quick 3-point shooter. It just kind of simplifies things. Phoenix's defense is still kind of figuring itself out. They're having a lot of issues with that. Joe, you like Nick Richards to once again bring the hammer here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the split of, you know, like the divorce almost between Nick Richards and Mark Williams is going to pay dividends for both of them in terms of their stock in the way that we can bet on them. For Nick Richards, when he's played really like more than 20 minutes or so, like consistently, he's been fantastic. And I also think that Phoenix they just don't really have a great option at the 5 right now. And Nick Richards is a little bit more of a role threat. He's a pretty good rebounder. And I like the 2-man game that he's already started to kind of develop with Tyus Jones. So hopefully Bradley Beal doesn't play. I think that might, that should help Tyus Jones in terms of the assists as well. And then obviously a little bit more Nick Richards. But the usage is there. The opportunity is there. And the minutes should be there, because when Nick Richards or Mark Williams, like I talked about before, when they're seeing 25 to 30 minutes, they've been really, really good in terms of their production. So I think they just needed an opportunity to kind of get away from each other. So I think it's a good opportunity and a little bit of a buy low here still, given the fact that he's got the new role with a new team. So he's at 18.5 points plus rebounds. I like that. Double doubles like plus 220, plus 240 or so. I think that's also worth a play as well.
Okay. On this one, am I seeing this right, Fiddle? Does this open 2.5?
For Grizzlies?
No, Phoenix. Phoenix is like action apps tracking. I guess this is the look ahead.
No,
line.
6.5. The Cavs open 6.5.
This is the look ahead line because they posted these early. That's right. I forget the action. We take whatever the first line is posted. So this was like the look at. That's a very.
That was like
telling
preseason.
number.
That was like before we
Yeah.
knew how great the
Okay, so I love this.
Cavs were.
Okay, all right. So we have a 5.5 point move off of how much better the Cavs are than we thought, how much worse the Suns are than we thought,
and Evan Mobley out.
Yeah.
Does that sound right? That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, the Suns haven't been good. So
my question, I'm not asking that. I'm asking, is it enough? Because I would argue, with me being at 12.6, that it's not enough. That this should be like Cavs minus 9.5 minimum, even without Mobley, based off of the performances of these two teams.
Maybe it overrates. I'm wondering if it's like overrating Mobley's absence, especially given the fact that we know, looking at last year, for example, Mobley's been, I think, better this year. But if we look at even last year, they don't need Mobley on the court to be good, especially in a regular season game. So I think the bad part is obviously that Mobley probably gets the Kevin Durant assignment, which, now we're looking at Dean Wade, who is not Evan Mobley.
Rude.
So that's like an issue, but at the same time, it's only one guy. So I think what Cleveland does schematically is going to be tough for Phoenix.
We have Booker and Kevin Durant coming off a long night at the Lions game as well.
True.
I just want to check my number real quick on this, and that's right. When Dean Wade plays the Cleveland Cavaliers, the last two seasons are 64 and 24 at 73% and 61% against the spread when Dean Wade plays.
I still don't
Unreal.
get it.
This
The MVP
season,
of the gambling world. Just don't tell anybody.
this season they're 28 and 3, 22 and 9, 71% against the spread when Dean Wade plays.
It's outrageous.
I need that explained to me, honestly.
He's good. I was talking to a scout who loved
get
him in
that,
G
but-
League. No, like I was talking to a scout who loved him in G League, and they're like, everyone knew that he was like a very good defender, and no one believed it. And then he just couldn't shoot, and now he can shoot. Extremely versatile.
People are saying the greatest Wade to ever wear a Cleveland jersey.
Oh boy. I mean, it's true, honestly, given the resume of wins.
Finally, I like Zion Williamson 25 plus and 30 plus in the last game of the night between the Jazz and the Pelicans. I can't accurately get a line on this. I have zero idea how to cap Pelicans with Zion without her. Like they and the Sixers are just nope. I have no way to figure this out. I don't know what they look like. I don't know what the profile is. Like, numbers says that this should be an under, and I should like the Jazz. I don't like either of those. I lean over, and I lean Pelicans, because the Pelicans, with Zion back, have looked like an actual, and CJ in particular, actually, I think is very big there. And they look like an actual basketball team. And the Jazz are the Jazz, and there's no Larry Marketing, and all these type of things. And so I get it. I don't really want any of that, but here's what I will say. The Pelicans are the worst team in the league in points in the paint allowed per 100 possessions. Number 2 is the Utah Jazz. So I wanted to bet John Collins over, but he's out. I do like Walker Kessler. though, to maybe put up some numbers here, Joe. I think Walker Kessler could do some damage against Eve Meese and this itty-bitty Meese front
I think he
line
was
for the
sick today, too.
Yeah,
if
he
I
was
recall.
out.
Like, I think he was
Played-
out. Or like
Played against him in fantasy. Enjoyed it.
he's questionable, I think, too. So, I mean, this is getting ugly. Like, this is getting real ugly. I mean, they just played the other day. Zion scored 24 points in 22 minutes. Walker Kessler didn't play. So this is one of those.
You're underselling it. He had 24, 14, and 6 in 22 minutes.
Yeah, no,
I really like Zion's over 4.5 assists too.
Yeah,
yes, I was gonna say points and assists 28.5.
Yeah, it was outrageous, honestly. Like he just smoked them. So he's having a good time while he's playing in his 22 minutes a game or so that he's getting this play. I like your play. I like this play.
He took 21 shots in 22 minutes.
Like nobody's gonna stop him.
He had like 7 offensive rebounds.
11 for 21 in 22 plus minutes.
It's fantastic.
Does anybody have any sort of read on this? I know this is like the grossest one on the board, but like, does anybody have a read on this game?
I mean,
the over. Honestly, the over.
Okay.
Because the way that the Jazz are playing recently, they are just launching threes. Like, it's relentless. And I would say the same thing for the Pelicans. They're playing so fast. And to bring it full circle, you said don't watch the Jazz stream. The Pelicans stream is with who? Antonio Daniels. It's probably my favorite League Pass announcer.
So good.
He's so unbelievably good at explaining the game. I learned so much listening to Antonio Daniels that I will actually find myself watching the Pelicans versus J Money calls the Jazz with no J, the ass.
And Colin Sexton's not playing either. So Sexton's not playing, Johnny Juzang's not playing, Lauri Markkanen's not playing, John Collins isn't playing, Jordan Clarkson's not playing.
Isaiah Collier over for the sickos, points and assists.
I will just tell you that Colin Sexton timing is curious.
Yeah, they listed him as quote tanking on Underdog.
But
they literally said
tell.
rest. He's
Do
out
tell.
for rest.
On MLK Day, that better be a fine from the league.
It's 26. What is he resting for?
Wait. Is John Collins is out too?
Yeah.
The NBA finding Utah on MLK Day for a rest spot would be one for the ages.
But they're not going to.
NBA Twitter would erupt.
I think they actually have like good reason to. Oh yeah. Okay, we'll see what happens there. That's interesting. Meanwhile, 25 plus Zion Williamson points, a double for Walker Kessler, and the over 232.5 is plus 415 at DraftKings. Send it in. Banging out these same game parlays.
That's a get funky type of game.
Yeah, this one's gonna get weird.
Yeah, Isaiah Collier is the one that I would look at if I were being a total like delinquent.
17.5.
Cody Williams.
Threes.
I will give one more here, which is I didn't notice this. I'm gonna bet Celtics -7. I have this 8.8 fully healthy, and Draymond is out and Steph's questionable, so I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. Like I have been very profitable by fading Boston. I've been telling everybody like there's problems, and they're like, no, they're fine, and they just keep losing. But this is a great spot. Like Boston national TV versus the Warriors, team they get up for. Even with a letdown spot, if Steph doesn't play, they will still get up for this game. No Jonathan Kuminga. 7.5 is too light. The Warriors are not in their class. This is this should not be 7.5. It's not a preposterous line. I get it. It's a road game, 8-point favorite. I understand, but I do not agree with that assessment based off of the injuries here. Like at 8.8, I have to give Draymond at least 1.5. Even though he hasn't been necessarily awesome this year. I think this should probably be 10. I know that seems extreme. Boston's better on the road than they are at home. Now, they're only 44% against the spread on the road this season, which is not particularly great. But guess what? The Golden State Warriors are 43% against the spread at home. So this is a bad spread team on the road versus a bad spread team at home. Fiddle, I think I looked over this game too quickly with the injuries. I think this is even if Steph is ruled in and I lose value on this number and it goes to 6, I want Boston here.
Market heavy agrees with you from open to where it is right now.
Okay. So
my bankroll agrees with you. My pending wagers agrees with you.
Okay. So I've got Zion Williamson 25 plus, 30 plus as well. I like Hawks Knicks over. Fiddle likes Knicks on the spread. What's your threshold again there?
6.5 before the cat news, 8 with the cat news.
Okay. I like Cavs -8. Joe likes Mark Williams over 15.5 points. Desmond Bane over 18.5 points. Fonseca likes Mavs Hornets under 224.5. A Jalen Johnson double-double. And you have one more, right?
We're going to add Isaiah Collier with all those injuries.
I'm just
points assists, 17.5.
Yeah, that's good.
Collier points and assists.
That's good.
Okay, I'll do it for buckets. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys enjoy the holiday. A couple of things for programming notes. You can catch. So you got this show. There's already a college football preview for the national championship on BBOC. Go listen to that before Monday night's game. Then you've got the favorites from Sunday night, getting you set for the AFC and NFC championship games. You will have the Sunday recap on Action Network podcast. On Tuesday night at 8 Eastern, we're doing a special live edition of Buckets. Set your calendars, turn on notifications. We're doing it with showus.tv. It's going to be broadcast on there and on our YouTube channel. It's going to be absolutely phenomenal. We're looking forward to it. It's going to be really great. Jay Money, Sean Little, and me giving you a breakdown on the huge Wednesday slate in the NBA. So make sure to check out that show. We appreciate you guys joining us. My thanks to David Payne, our producer, Bridie Rubino, and Gifford Gould for getting us up at youtube.com/theactionnetwork. Hope Gifford gets to enjoy watching the Chiefs play once again in the Arrowhead Invitational next weekend. We'll see you guys again tomorrow. Till then, let's get buckets.